Today we are researching our German ancestors, and this is a Choose My Next video. And I'd like to thank my followers who made requests. And in the future, if you'd like to request what my next video should be, visit me at Tiffany Dunn Genealogist on Facebook and drop your request. If you'd like to learn more about German research or more about generalized research, please check out my Facebook private social learning group called Next Step Genealogy. An assumption that we're going to make for today's video is that your ancestor of German descent lived at some point in time in the United States. We're also going to encourage revisiting records that you have already looked at. And why do we do this? Why do we look at things we've already checked? Well, we may have missed something. A detail that seemed insignificant may now be crucial to actually figuring out where in Germany our ancestors lived. There could be new records available since the last time you did research, so look in places that you've previously looked quickly, just to make sure there's nothing new available. What are some of the records that we may find for our German ancestors? We could find ship manifests from when they left Germany as they came into the United States. You could find immigration and naturalization records. You might want a reminder that those types of records don't have to be closely dated to when your ancestor actually immigrated. So keep a wide year span for when you're looking for naturalization records. If your ancestor went to church, the new church in the United States or the receiving church will typically have records from when your ancestor started being in that congregation. Census records, that's a great one. Just because you find your ancestors in one census, look for them in all censuses that would have been a possibility. Each census asks slightly different questions, and so you might be able to infer some things from one that you haven't from another. Marriage records, depending upon the dates that we're talking about, marriage records may be available. You'll want to look at your immigrant ancestors' children, especially birth and death records, where they probably had to list their parents' names. Often on official records, you may find German names instead of Americanized names. Military service, your ancestor may have served in the military. Newspaper articles, that's always a good one. Death records for themselves. Sometimes you'll find reference to the place where they lived in Germany. One of my personal favorite types of records are city directories and maps. So what I encourage you to do is go back and look for all of these records in the United States for your German ancestor. And you're looking for anything that points a clue as to where in Germany your ancestor came from. Some principles that we're going to use. We're going to really use the fan principle, where not only do we consider our ancestors, but if we can figure out who their friends, associates, and neighbors were, we can make some best types of guesses as to where we might research next. People who came from Europe tended to associate with people that also recently came from Europe, and typically they would live in neighborhoods that were of a similar makeup as to the neighborhoods they left behind. So when we're ready to look for German records, it pays to know what we have access to. So if we're over on ancestry.com, and here we are in the card catalog for Germany locations. Again, if you'd like to learn more about using the card catalog, then please check out my group on Facebook for private social learning. Um, and you'll find a lot of resources that teach you all about using the card catalogs on different platforms. So if we look down here, we'll see different data collections. Germany, census, and voter lists right here. Germany, birth, marriage, and death. So you can see the names of the records and then generally a count of records that are included. So these are sizable. They're not small, they're not huge. If we click through on one of these, here we have Germany Lutheran baptisms, marriages, and burials from 1500 to 1971. And so you can interact with these search boxes to enter in the information pertinent to your German ancestors. But what you'll want to do before you even do that is take a look and see what you can learn about the record collection. And so it'll tell you things like what areas are covered, because usually record collections like this, it's not like they just are for all of Germany. So you'll want to read through and see what areas are specifically included or if there are known areas that were omitted. This collection contains parish registers from numerous Protestant communities, and so that's important to know. And military garrisons found in former or modern German territories. The records are largely organized according to historical regions and church districts. So that is important to know, that you will have to learn multiple names for the same place as you do your research, depending upon when your ancestors lived in German territories. So we'll back up on Ancestry, back to the card catalog page for Germany. There are some German military records, and there are some immigration and emigration records. So the immigration records are for people who moved to Germany. The emigration records are for people who left Germany. So you'll want to take note, especially of the emigration records. And here's one that's a U.S. German immigrants, but you'll notice it's a very small number. So when you click through on that, read in detail who's included in that. You don't want to make an assumption just because your ancestor wasn't included. Maybe there was no reason for them to be included because they didn't live in this particular area. Then we go down to newspapers. There are some pictures. There are some court land wills. Not a small number, not a large number. Might be worth checking this out. And you'll note that some of these databases are not actually just housed on Ancestry. You may be able to find them in other places on the internet. Let's look over at Family Search. One of my favorite resources is the Family Search Wiki. And so we are on the Family Search Wiki. Again, there are lessons that I go into great detail about how to use these. So please check those out at Next Step Genealogy private social learning Facebook group. German genealogy. So as we mentioned earlier, there was a lot of territory shifting, a lot of different names for the same places. As we scroll down on the Family Search Wiki page about Germany, we'll see a series of maps. And this particular set of maps is the German Empire, which was 1871 to 1918. So this first map is areas that were not part of Prussia. And then here, the second map is areas that were Prussia. And so after 1918, things changed a little bit, but you can see there 1871 to 1918, we also had some city-states and the Thuringian states. And as we go down to 1945, you'll see that it looks more, it's modern Germany. It looks more like what we're familiar with. So what's interesting to note here is depending upon when your ancestors moved to the United States, they may have recorded in various records either the name of the place where they were born based on what it was called when they were there, or they may try to keep current with whatever the name was at the time they were filling out a given document. And so on census records, for example, you may see several different places listed for where your ancestors came from or where they were born. And they could all indeed be referencing the exact same place. They were just trying to keep up with the changing names. There have been changes, and so this map documents changes between 1918 and 1946. Below these maps, then we find additional resources for German genealogy. And so it's a really nice list that you can click through from Family Search Wiki to see other opportunities for research. And so how you use the Family Search Wiki is you keep coming back to it as you're conducting your research. It's not, you don't reference it just when you're becoming familiar with an area. You want to keep coming back to it and seeing what you can, based on what more information you have, what can you now learn that didn't make any sense to you when you were first starting? Okay, so we go back up, we can look at provinces, kingdoms, and duchies of the German Empire. And so we have a list of those that were independent from Prussia, those that were part of Prussia, and then those were Thuringia. There were also some city-states that were on their own. And so their records are going to be not included in some of these areas. So you have to get to know the place where your ancestor originated from. And that's tricky. And so it really depends upon what records you found in the United States.